thank you for joining us tonight. We promise you will be let out before the debate starts in case you were waiting for the debate. If you're looking to avoid the debate, you can, stay with us or just go to sleep right after this event. Nothing good could come of this. Thank you all for joining us. I'm actually just going to fill the air for a couple of minutes just as we slowly gather and let some latecomers join in and make sure everybody gets comfortable with their Zoom. This is your chance to look for friends. Eve Landau, I see you out there. It's so good to see you, Eve. Sorry you guys are all muted, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So we will unmute you for questions that you might have to ask, and I'll explain in a moment how to do all of that. And please don't be afraid to turn on your cameras. We love seeing you. We miss everybody. And it's great to have you all here virtually at least, and hope you're enjoying all of our film programs. Let me also share with you a couple of our upcoming screenings that we're having. First of all, starting next week, or on the 12th, October 12th, it's like I said, a week and a half, we have our new Israeli cinema film class, which will be running for 7 weeks. Please join us for an interactive conversation on everything that has to do with new Israeli cinema. And I will be moderating and leading that class, and hope to have some special guests there too. And it's a great way to get a little more interactive around some of the movies that we try to show to you year round. Also coming up in our, so we've put up all of our October films already, and we have the film Mighty Ira coming up October 2nd. And that's a film about Ira Glasser. So he will be there with us, and we're very excited to have him there. He was for 23 years the leader of the American Civil Liberties Union. Many more films coming up, including for Sukkot, a special conversation around the film Get Out, which deals a lot with hospitality, which is one of the elements of the holiday of Sukkot. And now I'm happy to jump into tonight's event. I hope some of you got to see, or most of you got to see. Wave your hands if you saw tonight's film. Okay, we are seeing some hands out there, which is great. A Call to Spy is coming to us from IFC, and I want to give a big thank you to IFC. This is the second IFC film that we're screening here in the last 2 weeks. It worked out that way. They also brought to us Ottolenghi and The Case of Versailles. If you haven't checked that one out, that one's on IFC now. And I want to give a big thank you also to Tamar Simon from Mean Streets. And she has brought this amazing panel together. And I'm really excited to introduce, I'll start with the director of the film, Lydia Pilcher. Lydia, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
This is, by the way, your time now to switch to speaker view if you're using speaker view. We'll get back to your friends later, but now we'll take speaker view. We also have here one of the stars of the film, Linus Roache. I didn't ask you how you pronounce your last name.
That's good, Isaac. Yeah. I mean, Roche sounds a lot more sort of, it sounds nice, but actually it's Roche.
Well done. And one of the stars and the producer and the writer of the film, Sarah Thomas. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everybody.
Sarah, you have to share where you're coming to us live from.
Oh, I'm coming to you live from a highway in Philadelphia. We did a little Philly premiere at a drive-in that just launched about 30 minutes ago, where we shot part of the film.
Fantastic. Fun. Thank you for being here and making the efforts. I want to start by saying that, first of all, this was an amazing thriller. I don't see enough thrillers these days. I don't know if others feel this way, that they don't make thrillers like they used to. And I think a thriller's down to the basic. I was at the edge of my seat constantly in this movie. And I haven't felt that way in a long time. So thank you for putting me under that kind of level of stress. And what amazes me is that IFC has really been an amazing proponent of independent films for years. And this is an independent film. This is not a big Hollywood production. Tell us a little bit about how you went about accomplishing a high-level historic piece as an independent production. And Sarah, we'll start with you and then go to Lydia as the director. Sarah is the producer. You're wearing your producer hat now.
Sure. Well, it all started with finding the right place where you can shoot this kind of in a low budget way. And I am from Philly and have brought all my films here and have kind of connections from shooting my movies here. And there is a generous tax credit. And so we started, Lydia and I, in Philadelphia, where we found these amazing locations like our Drawson Estate, which is actually the home of the family that inspired the Philadelphia story, and an exact replica of the Scottish mansions where these spies historically trained in Philadelphia, fully period furnished. And then we paired that with Budapest, which I'll let Lydia talk about, which also had a 25% tax credit. But then above and beyond the locations, there was just, if you watch the movie and you see the credits, there's 5 minutes of them. And there really were just an incredible amount of people who invested in this movie, gave money, donated, or brought their A game and worked for low budget rates. And that was the way that this was made possible. But I'll let Lydia talk to kind of the Budapest portion.
Sure. My background is largely in producing. I've been directing the last couple of years. And so I've made a lot of period movies in my career, and I'm usually working between an independent to a studio type. So I was really excited about the challenge of creating the world in the way that we could do it. And Budapest was the first thought that I had in terms of recreating France during the war. I mean, as everybody knows, the cities have been quite bombed and you can't go there and recreate things. And Budapest had parts that really could be used and had some of the same architecture that you find in France. So it was really perfect. I went to Lyon as my first kind of dive into the research and really went to all of the places that our women were and sort of tried to walk the paths and walked in their shoes and what it was like to be them during this time. And Lyon also has an amazing resistance museum, which happens to be a military school that Klaus Barbie occupied when he got to Lyon. So there's a lot of history in this museum, but it's an amazing record of everything that happened in the resistance in France.
Linus, you've been in many amazing feature films, and of course are an accomplished actor here in the New York scene as well. And as an independent production, how was this unique?
Well, I mean, the main thing for me was actually it was Lydia, because Lydia is an old friend. I've worked with Lydia a few times, and if Lydia approaches you about something, you know it's going to be good. So that's how I got involved. In terms of the scale of it, I mean, I didn't quite know how it was going to look or feel. I knew we were under pressure with money, but it didn't feel too bad on the set. We got the time we needed to shoot the scenes in the way that we wanted to shoot them. There were a couple of hairy moments. I remember, Lydia, where at the end of a day, it was like, can we do this whole scene in one shot? And, you know, so but that's part of the fun of, I suppose, smaller filmmaking. You don't have that luxury of getting it wrong. And that's a bit like these people in this situation. They didn't have that luxury of time. So we were up against it. And that, for me, most of the work that I did in the movie was with a wonderful actress, Stana Katic, who plays Vera Atkins in the film. And so it was really, for me, it was like 5 days of intense engagement in that relationship at the SOE headquarters. And to be honest, the fact that we shot it in 1 week, that whole sequence, for me, all my work was done in 5 days. I enjoyed it so much. By the end, I just wanted to go back and start again and kind of add more deeper layers to it. So yeah, it was, we weren't hampered by the restrictions of budget, I didn't feel. And I'm very proud of the end result.
And I found that to be a very interesting component of the film, actually, that often in these spy stories, you follow the spy and you stay with the spy, and the headquarters kind of is at the beginning and the end, maybe. And having that evolve and that relationship evolve throughout was a unique angle on this story that I was happy to see and happy to follow, and also happy to take a little break from the suspense that was going on everywhere else.
Well, I mean, but that inside of that SOE office, they had their own weight of responsibility, and I felt that was the main challenge as actors to bring, actually, because you don't know what it's like to go to war unless you've been to war, and what it would be like to be responsible for so many other people's lives, that the fate of their life could depend on your decision whether a communique was for real or not. And it was, you know, it's quite something to even contemplate what that might have been like. And so for us, it was very suspenseful and intense, you know, to do.
Yeah, and I think it's responsible too. Where did that come from? Sarah or Lydia, how did that element as far as devising the story come about?
The actual screenplay, the story?
Well, okay, we could step back into the whole screenplay. Tell us from the beginning, and then I'd love to hear also how that balance between going back and forth between, I guess, London and the rest of Europe was, or London and France, really, how that balance came to be and those stories came out.
Well, I'll start with the screenplay, and then I'll let Lydia answer the balance question. With the screenplay, you know, I always start with a genre that I think is popular, entertaining, commercial. So my last film was Wall Street, and it was the first female-driven Wall Street movie. And so I knew I wanted to tell a spy thriller. I like you, love thrillers. I actually love James Bond for what it is. But within the spy genre, when you look at the female lens, there just aren't many, if any, stories about like the real female grit of day in and day out, what it's like to be on the ground as a female spy and not be a romance. So I had studied World War II in college and knew about like Churchill's secret army and knew there were women spies. But when I dig further into the research and found these three women, Virginia Hall, Vera Atkins, and Nora Khan, who, if you Google them, they're legends. They have won every award for honor and bravery that you could possibly win, and yet no one's made a movie about them. That was kind of the cue for me that this was a film that had to be made. And I'll let Lydia answer kind of the balance between. Oh, but before we go there, like one of the reasons I chose these three women, because there were 39 women that spied in France, is because they were first in their field. So Virginia was the first female field agent, Nora was the first female wireless, and Vera was kind of the first and only female spy recruiter. So instead of doing a biopic about any one of these women who can and should have their own biopic, by putting them together in this kind of hidden figures of the spy world, I hoped that it allowed for a more global story about how women from different backgrounds and religions can unite to resist, and how their diversity can actually be critical to the success of the mission.
Lydia?
Yeah. Well, I think the only time that the three women are all in the same place is at the beginning in the training section of the movie, and from that point, we start to you know, first we see Virginia go to France, and then Nora joins her. But London is always the nexus, because London is where all the strategy and all the instructions and everything is happening. And they're the ones sending supplies and sending agents back and forth, getting agents back to London. So there is a thread of connection. I feel that the emotional arcs of the characters and the emotional stakes for the characters really completely mirrored what was happening in the war at that particular time. So as you know, as this time was passing, before America sort of came into the North Africa event, and then they did, and then, you know, Barbie comes to Lyon, all of this pressure, and then sending Nora to Paris, which was even more dangerous. All of those emotional stakes were really tied to the stakes of what was happening in the war. So I feel that, you know, it really at that point then became kind of, you know, telling the story trying to go as seamlessly as possible between London and Lyon and Paris. Yeah.
So having such a women-centered film right now, of course, is especially as a suspense thriller, and not. I think it also is somewhat genre bending and not in a like a kind of like winking at the camera kind of way. I think is something that is refreshing and important to see right now. It seems like there was also a strong women leadership on this production, which also we don't see enough of in Hollywood, though we hope that's changing now due to the new guidelines from the Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Did it happen this way? Was it an actual decision that you made, or is it just you chose the right people?
Well, it was 100% a decision on both of our parts. You know, when I was looking for a director, I interviewed a lot of women and like a few men, and all the men said, you know, you're not going to give me the job. And I said, that's right. No, but I'm joking. But in all joking aside, I think this was a female lens story, and it was important to bring more women's perspectives behind the camera, but also in a balanced way. So where we have a huge team of women behind the camera, it's also balanced by a male editor. Lydia, do you want to comment more on this?
Well, I mean, I would say that I've always been, you know, it's always been very organic, that I've been drawn to stories about women. And when I read Sarah's screenplay, I mean, these are such powerful women. I mean, these are women who really were guided by a sense of purpose that was much bigger than themselves. And it's such a rare quality to find in anybody today, that I just felt like, wow, if we can really tell this story and people can feel inspired by what it was like to be in their head as they had to make these moment-to-moment life-risking decisions. I always get a little nervous about the word thriller, because thriller feels like entertainment, and it's not that. It is really, we're really talking about life and death. And but there is but it's all about what is driving these women, which is which is really about the world and humanity, and they're willing to give everything for that. So just back to your original question, I mean, I believe very much in the importance of perspective and storytelling, and I think that it's a wonderful time right now that women have been recognized as an audience, so that women's stories are now validated as well. And so it's great to do that, and you realize when you have more women on the set that more contributions are happening in terms of all the little nuanced decisions that can happen in a day on the set. Everybody brings their perspective with them, so that perspective is relevant, and it was exciting to have a crew that was largely female driven, but everybody was there to support the female storytelling.
Linus, I'd love your perspective on this.
Well, I'm very happy that we're living in a time now where these stories are being told and can be told, and they will be told more. And it doesn't mean I'm out of a job, because men are a part of the world. So, and it's about time that this emphasis shifted. And my first film was a female director. I've worked with a lot of female directors. I happen to really enjoy that process. There's a sometimes just a different consciousness around the filmmaking, which helps me, which I love. And I think the film did a very nice job of nodding to the misogyny of the time in a kind of a humorous way, in a true way. But also, to speak to Lydia's point about this was the greatest generation, in the end. And what I loved about Buckmaster's relationship with Vera Atkins was, in the end, it was about getting the job done. And it went beyond gender, it went beyond those sort of differences. It's like, if you see that right quality in someone, and he grew to be, after, I think not wanting women for a long time to be spies and agents, he grew to be enormously respectful and very good at spotting what is that talent, what is that skill, what is that warrior spirit that you need to get the job done. And there was enormous respect between him and Vera Atkins, from what I've understood, or that's how we did it in the movie. But to speak to the times, bring it on. bring it on. May there be many, many more female stories, and there will be many, many more to be told.
Wonderful. And if that is not enough reason, apart from it being a wonderful film, for you to tell all your friends to see this film when it comes out on IFC, then please help spread the word wherever you can. So this movie, I'm going to ask just 2 more questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And this is my time to tell the audience that if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and then we'll call on you and unmute your mic. But you chose really 3 fascinating women to follow, each one with their own, I'd say, interesting backstory. We haven't said much about Nora yet, and that's something I don't think I've ever seen in a World War II story, an Indian character. Has anyone? Can you might have done the research better than me.
I hadn't seen it when I kind of chose to write about her at all. I hadn't seen a disabled woman or you know, a Jewish woman or an Indian woman in leading roles in World War II films. English
patient, somebody noted.
Ah.
Good one. But not playing a spy like that, I don't know. Definitely not a woman spy. It was such a unique, and I think also just added to the diversity of the story.
Yeah, and
yeah. Go ahead, Lydia.
A lot of the SOE agents are more well known in the UK because it's part of British history, and I think Nora is someone who has been upheld to the point where they're talking about, you know, putting her on a postal stamp. There's a lot of you know, there's a lot of we're hearing about it all the time. So I think what's interesting is that women represent international city. In Romania, her family, she left Romania to actually because the British wanted her to come to the UK because of her strategic mind, and she had been helpful to them in the war when she was in Romania. But Nora's character, I mean, her father was a Sufi mystic, so she had really actually, even though she was of Indian descent, she had an American mother, and she had lived in France and England and had been given British citizenship. So while she, I think, felt a big tug to India, especially at a time when Gandhi was starting to speak out about independence, she was very much a woman of the world. And then Virginia had been working in France as an ambulance driver and had really wanted to, be where she could, use her skills to the best advantage. And so she brought a whole nother perspective to this trio.
Very colorful, very diverse. It was really, fascinating characters, and not what we normally get to see in our World War II thrillers. My final question is, of course, I found this film very relevant today and its messages, and some of it is what we're talking about right here, right now. But I'd love to hear from all of you why you think it's important to tell the story right now.
So this is really a film about the power of the individual in terms of its core theme, and how no matter what country you're from, no matter what religion, no matter what your background, you can take action and you can make a difference to fight for whatever you believe in. And I think that is the message that is incredibly timely now. These women put their lives on the line to spy in the beginning, when there was no established spy network, when they could fail. And I think, whether it's go out and vote in November, but make a stand for what you believe in, and don't stand by and let the evil take over, because history does repeat itself.
Yeah, I think that I felt that when I read the script 2 years ago, that it felt a bit of a cautionary tale. And I think now it feels like we've come into sort of a haunting reality where it is way more comparable than it even was 2 years ago. But I mean, really what we're talking about is, systems where people are valuing human life differently. And I think that that's the, that's kind of the crux of it all, and what's happening today. And that's really that's really what we need to stop and look at history and really understand what's happening.
Yeah, I'll take Lydia's answer, but if I was to do I suppose those were extremely challenging times. Hopefully we'll never know anything quite like that, but we are in very challenging times right now, and it seems that whatever the situation, progress relies on the courage of the human spirit, and it's always been the same way, and it probably always will be the same way. So when you see that story, hopefully it fills you with the humility and the respect and maybe some of the courage that we can come through and do the right thing for the right reasons.
And I think the importance of being brave right now is really not understated. I'd love to take some questions from, thank you all so much for these insightful answers to these questions. And I'd love to take some questions from our audience and make them a part of it. I also wanted to note, of course, that as we were talking about diversity, I forgot to mention, of course, that the ReelAbilities Film Festival, which is the largest disability film festival in the country, runs out of the Marley Myerson JCC Manhattan here in New York, and seeing that level of diversity too, which is often overlooked. And actually, I felt that the film often contended with the topics of disability was something that I know we don't see enough of in film. And so we were really happy to see that there as well. Sarah, did you do research into, what kind of research did you do into disability relating to that time? And is that based on also the truth behind your character?
Yeah, so Virginia Hall wasn't born disabled. She shot her leg off in a tragic hunting accident when she was 27 in Turkey with her father's shotgun, and she almost died. And when she lived, she got gangrene, and her leg was amputated, and they had a wooden leg below the knee. And by all accounts, I spoke to her family's living relatives. She was in pain every single day. And I also spoke with some prosthesis experts of the time. And interestingly enough, they only made a prosthesis for men in the 30s and 40s. So not only did she have a disability, but it didn't fit her leg. And so she constantly had to deal with that on a daily basis, the pain, the discrimination. And by some accounts, she had no limp. She really tried to hide it, and then she was called the limping lady by the Germans. And so, as an actress, I really tried to play the middle ground a little bit and not overdo it, because I know that as a human being, she did try to hide it because she didn't want to be discriminated against because of that disability. In terms of playing the role, we did all kinds of different things, from having a wooden thing on my leg that tied to my back, till my back went out, to styrofoam, to a little stump. I mean, we did all kinds of things. I did actually rupture my Achilles tendon after shooting and couldn't walk for a year from playing this role, which was an interesting post-shooting note, because I have an entirely new and larger respect for Virginia Hall, if that's even possible, after not being able to use a leg for a long time. It's just like, it's even how people look at you when you're in a wheelchair, even in 2020. I can only imagine what it must have been like from her day in and day out.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to open it up to questions from the audience, and we're going to start with our friend Eve Landau. Eve.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to ask a question about research as well. I just finished reading for a book group, A Woman of No Importance, which is the story of Virginia Hall by Purnell, a British journalist. And I understand that Virginia kept basically no notes of her own, no diaries, no letters, because she took her role as a spy very seriously. So I'm curious, Sarah, about what kind of research, where you found the research on her. I know that Purnell got archives opened and all kinds of things.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you read that book. We just did a panel with Sonia last week. So I have all the archives as well. There's kind of the spy files that are the SOE spy files on all of these women. It's about 100 pages each. For Virginia Hall specifically, it's a lot of her reports and what she wrote back to London, and some of the quote unquote more archaic lines in the script that I insisted on, keeping in, even if they felt archaic, or actually her words, like, it's my neck, and if there's a crick in it, that's my prerogative. Well, she wrote that to London. So I wanted to keep that essence of her. But like you said, she never gave any interviews. Her spy cover was so important to her. So getting to the internal as an actress is challenging because she's a real person and I wanted to do it right. And so there was that was the hardest thing for me as the actress. I will say, speaking with her living relatives, they would give me little tidbits of stories of things she did in life that weren't in the movie, that had nothing to do with what we were shooting. Like, she always played the male roles in the school play, and she wore snake bracelets to school. And that gave me a sense of like how much like chutzpah, I guess is the word, she had. And so that helped me kind of dig into the personality.
Isaac, I want to mention, or I'll say Eve, I wanted to mention also that, her cover was really, and it was a whole fascinating setup because she was literally hired by the New York Post. Vera Atkins had a contact. George Packer was the publisher of the New York Post. He was Jewish. He had been to Europe many times helping refugees, and he was more than happy to have her Virginia Hall be a reporter, a foreign correspondent for the New York Post. And for the SOE office in the UK, it was an opportunity for her to actually send back in articles what life was like in France. And she was able to cable the reports, which were press protected. And we were able to access them in archives and read them. And they're just, filled with interesting details, but you could see how important they were in the London SOE offices to really understand what kind of danger all of the agents could be in at any given moment.
We have a question from Eileen. Eileen, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask my question. I'm curious, my background is I'm a professor of French, and I do women's studies courses. And one of the people that I've worked on with my students is Madeleine Foucault, who was the head of the rival spy network of the SOE. And it's only recently been released from the archives in France about her work and what she did to organize that spy network, especially with the radio operators. I was wondering if when you were writing the screenplay for A Call to Spy, did you come across any stories of rivalries or anything, especially for recruiting female spies in France?
That's a great question. I mean, personally, I did not. I mean, once I landed on the SOE and the women that I wanted to tell the story about, just because of the scope of a screenplay, I kind of lasered into just that world. But it sounds fascinating, like something I definitely want to look into for sure.
And the resistance was very international. People had come from all over the world to basically fight the Nazis. And so there were many different groups, many different nationalities on the ground in France at this time. And that was part of, what Virginia was doing, was organizing these resistance groups. But I think it's worth noting how internationally diverse they were.
And can I ask about Colonel Buckmaster and Linus's character, his background?
Interesting character, what I could find out about him. I mean, he went to Eton, which is one of the, the highbrow schools, but his father went bankrupt. So he only stayed on by tutoring younger boys. So he then became very self-sufficient, went to work for Ford Motor Company. And because he spoke French fluently, he was working over in France and looking at the factories over there, which is why after he came back, he served in the Second World War and came back from Dunkirk, he was recruited for SOE F section because of his knowledge of France. Now that's great. He knows French, he knows a bit about France, and he knows where some factories are. But apart from that, he's thrown in the deep end just like everybody else. No one's had any precedent for how to do this. And there's a line we have in the film where he says, we learned the hard way, a lot of trial and a lot of error. And I think it's that courage that they found to, muscle up, keep going, keep moving, keep responding, even with the losses and the intensity of it. And even in his own book, which is called They Fought Alone, he wrote 2 books actually. I found the tone of it very kind of almost like a boy's own annual. It was hard to believe that he was really fighting a war, because it's part of that generation. He didn't make a big song and dance about it. He didn't glorify his own work. It was, oh, well, he went off and did this and they did that and they did the other, and it all went very well. And it was kind of, I wanted to then say, well, this man, the reports are, he was hardly sleeping. I mean, he was like 18-hour days, 7 days a week, hardly seeing his wife. He hardly ever left the office. He bore an enormous amount of responsibility. And at the end of the war, he was actually blamed for a lot of the losses of lives in SOE. So 400 agents in the field, and a lot of them died. But I think, again, history has now looked back and looked more kindly and realized that that whole effort shortened the war by 6 months. And I think Eisenhower said it was worthy of 15 divisions. And I suppose history has put things straight, but an incredible character in a way, but again, not so much known about him, I suppose. You know, a lot of these people did not sing their own song. So a lot of work has to be done to find out who they were and you know, what great heroes they were.
There's a question from the audience here. Thank you. There's a question here from the audience about the release of the book. That's a Woman of No Importance, and the timing of this book and the film, if that was at all planned.
Not at all. In fact, there was a press release that came out right before when we're about to start shooting about this book and being sold to a big studio for the rights, A Woman of No Importance. And I called my publicist who may be on the line, but and I said, should I give up? Should I not make this movie? Because J.J. Abrams is going to make this movie based on this book that hasn't been published yet, and I'm a small fish, and I'm making an independent film, and I can't compete, frankly. And it is because of her, Becca Sides Kaplan, that this movie exists, because she said, don't give up, your story will be different, and they may or may not make it on that timeline, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, fast forward, we made the movie, and it just is total luck that her book came out, you know, after our movie was complete. And it's actually great because there is no competition. Like, these are Virginia Hall's story can be told in a big budget way, can be told many times. Churchill's story is told how many times. So it's actually just really nice because now the world's getting to know her by name, and hopefully it'll help her book sales, and her book sales will help our movie.
For sure.
There were some movies made in the 50s about SOE agent, and it's interesting, those are women that didn't make it, were executed in concentration camps. But a lot of we learned from the research with our women that they didn't want their stories told while they were alive. They, you know, they really wanted to preserve the secrecy. And in fact, Virginia was given a medal that she didn't want any press or anything to be spoken about it, because then people would know who she was. And so it's really only after, you know, after Vera and Virginia have now finally passed that it's even been okay to write about them.
Just to speak to that point, I actually did an interview today with Sonia Purnell, and she mentioned that after doing all this investigation, like 3.5 years of research, like trying to piece together out of operations, where was Virginia? Was it her? Because they didn't know if it was her. And she went to speak to one of the relatives, and she was telling them stories that they'd never heard about their own grandmother or what have you, you know. So again, they didn't want to speak about it because that's the job of a spy, I suppose. It's also a testament to that generation.
Yeah.
We're going to take one last question from Rochelle Patchman. Rochelle?
Okay. Okay, hi. Coincidentally, I just finished reading an extraordinary book called DDay Girls. And it is exactly about this topic and includes mention of the protagonist and other women who are very well known. I've probably read, I don't know, dozens of books on this topic because I'm obsessed with it. And in the book, at the end of the war, they talked about how the women agents were given no official honor, no official title, like her Majesty's this or Her Majesty's that, as the male agents were. And then only later, some posthumously, were they given acknowledgement. And I was wondering if you came across anything about that. Because, I was just mind boggled by the courage of the women. I mean, I've always thought, what would I have done? Could I have had the strength, the courage? Would I have chosen to do that? And I believe that most of them came to work for the SOE initially, not knowing when they got the invitation that it was to be an agent. They just received a letter from, what's his name, Buckmaster? I forget. Yeah. They would get a letter saying, "Oh, madam, would you care to come to our office? We'd like to speak to you." And then they would only then find out what it was about, and that they were going to be dropped in, parachuted into France to receive pilots and shipments of guns and ammunition to be hoarded and held until, the invasion. So, I mean, they were the bravest of bravest of bravest. Many of them were tortured and never came back. And some were tortured and, they made it, but they never got, I just was so surprised that in a country like France, that would have been the case. And I was wondering if you knew anything more about it.
Well, it happened in the United States. I mean, Virginia Hall was the spy that the Nazis dubbed the most dangerous of all Nazi spies, period. Not male, not female, just the most. And when she came back to the US and she wanted to be a diplomat, which had been her dream, and she'd been denied before she was this legendary spy, they denied her again on a technicality. They said no. So she continued to be rejected for many things for the rest of her life. And it's just, and I think it happened to a lot of women after the war. They were useful and needed in the war. And then the war ended and it was like, we don't need you anymore. And it's really sad. I mean, by all accounts, Virginia Hall was happiest when she was doing something, when she was, taking action. And that was the time during the war.
I did quite a bit of research in the Imperial War Museum in London, and I can say that there's a huge amount of respect for all of the women SOE agents, and there's quite a bit of material, throughout the archives and the exhibits. And I think that the UK has really embraced this time and embraced the women. I mean, there's a statue of Nora, a bust of Nora in Gordon Square in London. I think that I think it may have taken some time for people to get here, but it's happening. Yeah.
And Nora just was awarded the Blue Plaque in London, so it's a very prestigious. She's the first Indian woman who was awarded the Blue Plaque in the UK.
Wow. Before we sign off, I wanted to touch on one more topic, as we are the Jewish Community Center. Of course, it's actually noted in the film, the anti-Semitism in the UK that is pointed out in the film, and I just wanted to understand why you wanted to include that, where that came from, and really its relevance to today.
Well, it's historical, right? So it's actually in what happened to Vera. So Vera was discriminated against. She was Romanian, she was Jewish, and she had to hide those facts from her own company, from her own spy organization, and she was denied her citizenship papers. So it's all really historical and that's based on fact. But I have to say, as the writer, I did not know that. So going into this, I did not know that there was discrimination in London in 1940, 41. And it actually really surprised me because you're not taught that necessarily in the history books, right? And I thought it was a really important fact to highlight that, you know, no matter where people are in the world, even if they're on the Allies or et cetera, discrimination exists, and we have to be made aware of it.
But she wasn't allowed to work for the British government legally as a Romanian Jew. And that was one of the things that really drove, I think, you know, sort of the tension around her character. And, you know, Buckmaster supported her, and I think the whole British government valued her reputation as a deeply brilliant strategic mind, and that's why she was there. But it's interesting. There were a lot of, I mean, we make a reference to the fact that there was a lot of resistance to what was happening with refugees, and London was sort of, as America did as well, was putting up obstacles for refugees to come in, and it was creating a lot of fear around those movements.
I want to remind everyone this film comes out in theaters and on VOD this weekend. It's available for the next, I think, 24 hours on our platform. So please tell your friends, help spread the word. And any last thoughts, what people should know before
I would love to make a plug. You know, if you enjoy the film and if you want to see more female-driven content made by women and about women, it's really about the numbers of sales that this film does over the next couple months. So, you know, we are an independent film, and you know, anything you can do if you like the film, tweet about it, tell your friends, have them buy it, whatever. It's actually really, you can make a difference too in getting more of these stories out there.
Sarah, Lydia, Linus, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for making and bringing us this fantastic film, and good luck. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a good night, everyone. Good luck with the debates tonight. And I won't get into that too much. And let's stay safe and hope to see you all in person soon. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.